Yeah. Yeah, I just added it. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to talk to you about diversity, identity, and the self through the lens of image generative AI. So I have Lindsay Mack here. Thank you for joining me. I'll, start us off with a little introduction about how we know each other. So Lindsay and I worked on an Xfinity project through Comcast Stream Sage years ago. It's voice over remote, and also mostly I was on search and discovery. One of the best projects I think ever. I think Comcast has a really good setup for big data generation and processing, natural language processing technology. So it was a pleasure working with you at that time, Lindsay. I think Lindsay was and still is a dynamic product person, especially in the AI space, in the cutting edge AI space. So, thank you for joining me and joining us today to talk about your experience, and especially on International Women's Day, which is the reason why we picked this day to do this,
Amazing.
was because it is International Women's Day, and it's, I think, two things that should be identified in terms of the subject topic is, diversity and identity. And we'll talk about a little bit how images of people in general is impacting our day-to-day lives, especially as it relates to generative AI. So welcome.
Thank you, Melissa, for the great introduction. And I just have to say, I've had so much fun talking to you about this topic already. As Melissa mentioned, I'm most recently technical product at Comcast, and as such, have an endless curiosity for how things work. And so, as I've been taking some free time to learn more new different things, I've gotten really deep into a rabbit hole on generative and really thinking about all of the aspects of how this is going to impact our lives, ourselves. Like, it's here. We're going to have to deal with it. Or, no, I'm actually a huge fan, but we're going to be dealing with it. And so let's start exploring how it's going to impact, all of these other aspects of our lives, not just from a technology perspective. So that said, I am not a generative AI expert. Everything that I share with you today, I learned from the internet, probably from ChatGPT. I have some tips on how to use ChatGPT well. If you are interested, feel free to connect with me. Um, but I'd like to share with you first kind of how I got into this rabbit hole. And I also wanted to mention that there are slides that have a bunch of images in them linked in the chat. And so please feel free to go in there, browse through at your own pace to kind of follow along. I don't want to like do a presentation mode thing. And they're there for you with all of the links and other references that I will refer to. So anyway, how did I get here? In this weird like obsession with image generative AI after having a background in metadata and linguistics. It all started about last August when there was a lot of, everyone's posting on LinkedIn like their fake AI generated profile pictures, lots of commentary, it was all very generic at the time. It was expected, I should say, at the time. People being made to look more white, getting like some extra cleavage there in your profile shot, made to look thinner, the men had more hair, like all of the typical things. And most of the examples I've been seeing were all posted, by primarily by white men or maybe by white women. So I was like, well, I want to see what it's going to do for me. Um, the profile generation process is like you take some selfies, you upload it, analysis happens, spits out like 20 images. You can check the slides if you want to see my results from this testing. So as I was kind of going through all these, doing some experiments with friends, getting their feedback, I started to really think about like why, and it's a little bit of a toy, I'll admit. Last August was a different place than like we are now with generative AI, but it was definitely just like for fun. Started thinking about, well, what is it about me that it made me look like this or that or the other thing? And that's kind of where I started getting really deep into how does this actually work? And how am I internalizing like what this is saying to me, even having, this really broad kind of understanding of like it's technology, it is flawed, and we are not there yet. But I'm still like offended or curious about how this all reflects. So that's kind of my origin story of diving deep into generative AI for images. Lots of people along the way that I've gotten to meet through LinkedIn and from my past lives have been so helpful in kind of explaining it to me, giving me tools, giving me links. Really fascinating. I highly recommend rabbit holes. But today, what I want to share with you and open the conversation as well to anything you want to call out in the chat. And Melissa, like, we've had so many really fun conversations about this
Mm-hmm.
already. Anything like you want to interject? Main things I want to
Of
talk
course.
about, really, really high level, like my understanding of how image gen AI works, because I think that's really important to, as you look at the results, whether it's for images or chat GPT, like kind of understanding like that framework of this is where it's coming from.
Right.
Little bit of an exploration of some of the observations that I've made as I've gone through, and really just opening the conversation to like, what are the opportunities? What are the challenges, and how do you get involved and start thinking about this critically? Melissa,
Right.
anything you want to add to topic?
Yeah. So I wanna talk a little bit about some of the examples that
All right.
you came
Well
across.
then, if you are following along with the slides, uh, how
Can you
diffusion
hear
works,
me?
kinda, is where I am now. So, as I mentioned briefly, like my background's in linguistics. There's a lot of things around LLM and transformers. Yes, and
What
there's a lot of resources at the back of the deck if you want to learn more. So, like, I can hear you.
you can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Now we're in an awkward silence.
You can't hear me.
Chat at me if you can't hear me or something is going weird. Otherwise, I'm going to continue. I can hear you. Mhm.
You can hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay.
We might be on a delay.
Yeah,
Technical
probably.
difficulties. Never done this
Yeah, we're
before.
probably on delay. No, we're probably on delay. No, it's fine. I was gonna jump in and ask you a question though.
Oh, yeah. Go.
Yeah. So I wanted to hear a little bit about the various examples. So, for example, like I think you and I discussed that there were some pictures that came up when you were using ChatGPT. I think it was what is that? Their Dolly,
Mhm.
image generator. And so, based on that image that came up for you, what did you put in? I guess that's the first thing. Let's start there. Like, what was the prompt that you put
Gotcha.
in? What came up, and what was the discrepancy that you experienced with that?
Yeah. Also, I started just to like keep everyone on the same page. I started with these tools that were specifically for generating profile headshots. From there, my exploration took me really deep into DAL-E, which is the is attached to Chat GPT as well as OpenArt. Links are in the back of the deck, as well as Stability AI because I have a friend who works there and gave me a lot of credit. Thank you, Jeff Dodo. Um, and so those were interesting because they have two different models for how they actually do image generation. DALI is very, very heavily indexed on language because ChatGPT is primarily a language tool. They've used a lot of that in how they're coding DALI, I guess you're modeling DALI. Stability is the diffusion model, which I'll get into in a moment. As I was going through and kind of iteratively asking of ChatGPT, what are the standards of beauty, and like, give me an answer about Greek ratios and whatnot. Okay, can you give me give me a picture of a beautiful woman? Give me a picture of a diverse, beautiful woman. give me a picture of a non-traditional beautiful woman, and kind of in between each of those image generation tasks, asking like what about this like made it diverse or made it, non-conformist beauty ideals, to kind of try to see how the way that they had learned what these words mean were kind of reflecting in the images that were portrayed. So I didn't include all of them, but you have like your classically blonde, beautiful woman, diverse. Interestingly, almost any time you add diverse to a query, it automatically goes to Black, not Asian. I am Asian. I consider myself diverse. Maybe I'm wrong, but even
You are
putting in a
absolutely correct.
even putting in a picture of myself and asking it to turn me into a diverse, beautiful woman, I was like, well, yes, that person is beautiful, but not Asian, which was
So
actually
let's
one of
wait.
the.
So let's stop there for a moment. Let's stop there for a moment. So you put in information about, beautiful woman, and then your white blonde comes up, right, as the beautiful woman. So that's one bias, right? It's like, so in the eye of the beholder of Chat GPT, right? What beautiful is defined as is someone who is primarily, right? I don't want to judge Chat GPT too much, but primarily is a blonde woman.
It is our Western conventional way of defining beauty,
Yeah. Right.
and that is exactly what it generated.
Right. And so this is the thing is I am a fan of Chat GPT to a certain extent. And the reason for that is because of our discussion. And so because there's algorithms in place that are based on what is the common knowledge of some human that worked on it, right? And so if the pool of people that are working on this aren't diverse and don't see a different perspective of the common person that they may see, maybe in family members or maybe in
Yeah,
just their all around people that their community, they're only going to be able to generate algorithms based off of that, right? In terms of what their experience is, unless they're directed to not do so. Would you
right.
agree?
I have so many follow-ups. Thank you for the question, because it's
Yeah.
like it goes in so many different directions. Yeah, both
Yeah.
as being part of a community of people who are developing it, as well as users of it, is so critically important, so that there is that data. Like Melissa, you and I come from product. We look at a ton of usage data. If
Correct.
there's no representation of the other voices, even in our
Yes.
usage data, and we're serving them poorly, like we're not going to know what we're missing.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think, two other things about it. Um, sometimes people say like garbage in, garbage out. Really, what I think is that generative AI, as I say, is like amplifying all of the biases that are actually there in the world today. It's
Right.
taking
Exactly.
it's taking the world as it is today, and it is feeding it back to us, and we
Yeah.
don't notice that all of those biases that we have all day around us are there until Gemini happens, or you get
Right.
this answer from ChatGPT and you're like, why, or whatever, like why are they all white men? Why is
Right.
there only men in this picture?
And I
Um,
think one of our discussions was you sent me an example of a black woman who you're the one that exposed me to the fact that every time the diversity is in there, a black woman shows up or some black person. And so one of the examples were two of the examples they weren't smiling, right? And so most of the time when you see a picture of someone who is not in a diverse community, they're mostly smiling. They look like life is light and they have no worries in the world. And then you see someone who's in a diverse community, they just look like they have, rested BITC, face. And so um and I think that that is something that should be looked at, right? Is like, why does someone look like less light in life versus, and it could be just my image, right? I mean, in terms of like what I see through my eyes, like I could be just talking about this through my eyes, right? So then there's that part of it. It's like the interpreter versus the actual execution of the actual AI itself, right? So my interpretation of it is going to be through my experience, but yet still, we still have to put some onus and bias on the generative solution, right? So,
Yeah, and it's such a good kind of segue back to how it works because like you were mentioning that there's we create these archetypes of people, like the strong black woman. Sorry, and please nobody take any offense at
no, you're
anything.
right. Yeah. Like,
The strong
yeah.
black woman like is not smiling. The woman tech executive probably not smiling,
Right.
because that's what that's what the corpus that it's trained on is showing
Right.
because we've been trained as people to go show up that way in order to compete. Actually, I don't know if all the men are smiling in their pictures either. There's very rarely teeth, maybe because Gen AI does like a real bad job at the teeth part. But exactly. And so you take all of this data that is out there on the internet and you take how they're being described in words, and like that is what is feeding into what you get back in the end.
Mhm.
And so the way that we talk about each other, like diverse, what are there no pictures of Asian people that are described as
Right.
diverse?
Or
Um,
Latinx, or you
yeah,
know, all the people that are a part of the diverse community, and it could be just it's everybody. Like, diversity means everybody because it's equity and all of that,
exactly.
right? So it's everyone. But also, one of the other things that I wanted to point out was, like, even if I had searched, let's say, even a Jamaican family, right? Because I'm always going to bring that up, right? So, coming from an international family, whatever. If I put that in ChatGPT, I'm sure ChatGPT is going to come out with someone who has like locks, who's going to be a dark skinned person
You should try
and
it.
all that stuff. Oh, we should try it. Let's see. Let's try it now.
I'm on a hotspot because my Wi-Fi is not working. So, but you can try it, Melissa. Report back.
Yes.
Yeah,
Image
that's
of
actually so while
a
you test that, it was really interesting to me. So some of these tools, you actually can give it a seed image. If you look in the slides, like I gave it the same image, and would I actually said make me a new profile picture for Lindsay Mack. Again, my name is Lindsay Mack. I'm an adopted Korean American, um, and gave it a picture of myself, and it came back with a white woman named Lindsay Mack. So I was like, well, let's try giving it my Korean name. And it came back with somebody who looked like 1,000 times more Korean than I was like, who am I? Am I not Korean enough? Am I not like Lindsay Mack enough? I'm pretty sure I'm good on the Lindsay Mack front. Um, but it like that even was I was like, it is taking in my prompt my name and making this assumption about how that person should look. And like again, reflect how does generative AI help us think about the world around us? Like, do we do that? Probably
yeah,
more than we realize or we want to admit.
yeah. So I'm hoping that people will be able. Let me see if I can paste this image in here.
Yeah.
I don't think I can, but it was right. Like, it gave me a man with locks, right? Dark skinned man with locks. Beautiful browns, everybody's beautiful, of course, like brown skinned kids, and then a wife who's lighter with she has locks as well, but she has like a scarf on her head, right? So that is not the representation of my family, right? So, like, it's interesting that I know that's just one representation. Like, if I did a refresh, um, maybe it'll give me another one. But the whole point that we're trying to make is it's boxing people in, right?
It is. And if you and for especially like for kids, if we're not educating all of us around like what you are actually seeing, like there's a lot of risk in how that affects people. Kind of
Correct.
even going back to like Instagram and TikTok filters and like, we're both women. We grew up with all of the challenges around stereotype or your
Right.
conventional beauty ideals.
Right.
And so there is a real risk, I think, that is there, but we also have to understand. One of the sorry to like kind of completely jump off,
Yeah. No, no, you're fine.
but I love the like, what would it do? Like, go experiment with it. The one thing I would say if you're doing anything with generative AI of any kind, it's like iterate, like try different words, try to like ask it for more, ask why it did a thing. It's really, really interesting once you kind of like don't take your first answer unless it's perfect and you know that
Yeah.
it's never take the first answer. Ask why, or, can you give me another example, etc. Kind of see what is actually out there.
So look, so
Um,
I just did a refresh, right? And it gave me a cartoon characters because it obviously can't even figure out what the real be, right? So now it gave me cartoon characters of a guy with locks and he has like a hat on. And then now, at least this woman, the one thing that I would give them is like this woman, she doesn't look like the typical like black Jamaican woman. She looks more of like the minority in Jamaica, which would be a lighter skinned woman with straight hair, right? Who could be either from and East Indian descent, or who could be from Western European descent. She could be from Scottish descent or something like that, right? Or she could even be of Asian descent, right? So these are the things that could be in there. But the funny thing is that they made it a cartoon instead of making it look like real people. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
there's a lot around the technology there. I'm trying to share. Can I chat? Can I add things to the chat here?
You should be able to.
Okay,
You see the chat box
I
to the
don't see how
left,
to. I'm
upper
just gonna
right.
chat this one to you. It's a really great
Okay.
article about how AI is reducing the world to stereotypes. It's one of the
Mhm.
early things that I found that just had a lot of really interesting examples, and you'll go through them and you'll be like, well, yeah, that's obvious. But then again, it's like we have to question our own assumptions, and we have to question like what it basically, if the world were the internet, like what is there? And that is
Yeah.
what all of this is training off of and feeding off of. And so it's actually interesting, like, but some people would ask for that image for, I don't know, marketing collateral or whatever you're using it for. They'd be like, that's
Yeah.
not a Jamaican family. Like, but actually,
Correct.
maybe you could learn something about what a Jamaican family could be composed of. Like,
Yeah. Like my family has every single thing in it, right? So I think people are always shocked by that, right? But like, I have relatives that look like you. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, and they're actually like a first cousin. You know what I mean? Like it's not like it's like and so it's interesting on that aspect that people would not know that. Like if you, so that's why I was getting back to like, if you have not been put into that environment, you won't know that, right? So like me, I was set into an environment of, oh, I got everything. People wouldn't know that by looking at me, but you don't know that by looking at a lot of people. So you can't make assumptions. But I think that where we are, back to what you're telling us, is tools like ChatGPT or Gemini or so and so forth are making these assumptions that we're trying to elevate from. And we're like stagnant if they don't elevate with us. So although these tools are learning, they're learning fast, they're doing all this stuff, they're generating information pretty quickly for us, they still don't have that unbiased human aspect to say, differentiate or not, wait, let me not make an assumption. Let me ask another question and say, okay, is this really what it looks like? Or is there more that I can do for you to kind of dig a little bit deeper?
exactly. And there's some tools, some newer tools that maybe aren't as like well known by name that are doing that, like ask me a follow up. And so if you're kind of
Mm.
not really into it, like you go in there, you ask follow ups, like, act like it's like your least favorite teacher ever and from high school and you don't believe anything it's telling you. Be like, but why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where did you get that? Well, what about this thing? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it is really interesting sometimes if that you can get like the complete opposite answer. And then you're like, well, why did you tell me the first thing? It's like, well, that's what everyone thinks. But the second one is a more nuanced understanding. I actually did this around the Supreme Court thing. Like, I need to understand the Constitution. It's been a while. Happy. I'll put that in the chat too, because it's just. I mean, if anyone wants to be a nouveau constitutional nerd like me, to follow what's going on there. But yeah, definitely iterate, challenge it, have that level of skepticism, and just know that like it might be wrong, and
Yeah.
don't take everything at face
But then
value.
because that's a good point, because the other thing is the hallucinations that come with that, right? Is
Right?
because, like, again, this is a cartoon that just came up for me. So if I'm a child and I'm used to seeing cartoons, I'm going to have a perspective of, oh, this is what a Jamaican family looks like. And it could, you never know. But the whole aspect is to make some type of human judgment and don't always let the tool, make the decision for you.
Oh,
Really use it as a like Microsoft is using the word co-pilot right now. Use it as a co-pilot. Use it as something to generate thought, and then for you to have some critical thinking behind it, right?
exactly. I mean, like most people at work in the workplace, I don't think everyone just agrees with me all the time. But these are much better. But anyway, kind of on that point, though, I was there's like the human element. We have to keep the human element in the development of it, and we need to broaden that circle. There's actually a lot of writing around how people from the humanities, it can't just be computer scientists for a lot of reasons, but
Yep.
that we need more people from the humanities to be thinking about these external effects of AI, and also that we need to like keep like our human rationality there, because we call it artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent, it's pattern recognition, and
Correct.
right. There's a great article. I have it in the slides at the end. It was that just came out. I think it's an MIT technology review, where the guy is basically he's like, we don't really know what's happening. No one really knows yet what's going on there.
Correct.
And if there weren't like people on Twitter, on X, Twitter, whatever,
Mhm.
calling Gemini out like hours after it started, like how long would that have gone on? I'm not saying we all have to be watchdogs. I'm just saying we all have to be participants in the
Correct.
conversation.
Correct. Yep. Totally agree. I totally agree with that. And I mean, I think this was really helpful for, International Women's Day to talk about this, because I think that, I'm a huge proponent. The reason why I'm doing these LinkedIn lives is because I think that more women in general need to talk about these types of technologies, right? And of
Mhm.
course, because I'm a minority women in general need to talk about more of these technologies, right? And be able to see that constantly up front in your face, and to be able to have these kind of not debates but discussions around what's going to benefit us, right? Like how are we going to play a part, and so that these big corporations aren't making the decision for us, right? They're not just saying, okay, take what we put in here, but now we can say, but wait, there's some other things that you can think about. And I like the tool that you were talking about. I think it was what asked me a follow up. I think that's what it was.
Um, yeah, I will add to the slides though that
Okay.
are linked here, like some of the other tools that I've been checking out, and where it's encouraged, because I don't think it's human nature to I don't think it's human nature to
So
interact with like, a chat box in that kind of like ask me a follow-up way. So I think that like the UX side of it is also learning. Sam
yeah,
Bella has a question. Are there any type of safeguards currently being used? So Sam, that's actually a really good question. The original and sorry to completely interrupt you, Melissa.
no, you're
The
fine.
original
You're fine.
models that were the basis of a lot of the image AI technologies that originally came out. Some of the issues that they saw in them were like over sexualization,
Mhm.
violence, all of your kind of like what you would have on the TV, like warnings for the
Mhm.
rating and whatnot. And that there was a lot of bias when you look at racial stereotypes that
Mhm.
were perpetuating these images. And so there's a lot of attention now on cleaning those data sets. I think it's in the slides, like the Lion 2 model did a ton in ensuring that all of like the over sexualized and violent references were being cleaned out. Of course, like what is it being replaced with? We're not sure quite yet. There's also questionable, controversial, I guess you'd say, controversial efforts going on to try to synthesize additional training data that better represents um, a broader swath of reality.
Mhm.
And then, as we saw with Gemini, there's like active involvement in trying to actually balance in terms of prescriptive rules how things are coming out, but like it's all complicated. It's all way more complicated than saying, always include a diverse group of people in what you are generating if you are asking for certain things. Uh, it's a really interesting time just to be observing, is I guess my conclusion. Be
Mm-hmm.
engaged,
It's
be
like the gold
observing, be
rush.
thinking, be challenging what you see.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Sam. Um, Anything else you want to add for the audience?
I just reiterating kind of where we ended up with this. It's like go out there, try it, question it, think critically about it, especially like you're a technologist. Like it's it's uh it's only gonna get better if we use it and if we challenge it in all ways.
I agree. I agree with that. If we
And it's a
challenge it,
really exciting time to see how quickly everything is evolving. So
yeah,
I
challenging it and helping our government put the right policies in place to protect it, right? So
totally.
I think that's important as well. Is like I'm always like, let's try to figure out the right policy around it. Um, and then my thing, like, I'm a little bit opposed to trying it out just because it's so energy intensive. And as a low key environmentalist, I'm like, ugh,
Oh my
like,
gosh. We're like, there's a really good article in the Post, I think, yesterday about the
yeah,
consumption of data centers.
yes. So that's
Crypto
a
and AI, we're like gonna run out of energy, which is
yeah,
a
that's a
really
huge
interesting
deal.
problem to go into, by the way. Anyone
Correct.
wants to get into climate tech, I will introduce you to some people who are super passionate about it and like would love to hear your opinions.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And so, just be cautious in terms of using it for play. Like use it when you need it. At least that's my back, that's just my 2 cents. But thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a great conversation like we've had before. Again, I think the key takeaways are, when you're looking into these generative AI solutions, just think critically when you get the feedback, right? Make your own decisions, tweak it the way you think it should be tweaked, and move from there.
And I guess my closing on that would just be like question your own unconscious biases because that's that's the world we live in. That's what's feeding into what we see.
Oh, we have another one. Okay. Will AI help us become better at managing generating energy if we continue to develop it? Mm, Depends, right? Like if they're like
There
this is
also
what I'm
I
thinking is like it depends. It depends on
there are
like if
people
we're able
who
to
are
if we're able to like delineate it and and break it up, right? So if it's not like I'm a big proponent of smaller language models, right? If you have smaller language models, then it's less energy. You know what you're going to be using it directly for. You're not having a whole bunch of people just hitting it all the time for this random things. So that makes it a lot less energy consumed. But if you have these larger language models that people constantly are hitting up against, like that's consuming just a lot of energy for things that solution is, carrying information to various nodes and not knowing which nodes at that point
yeah.
to then generate the information. So I think if we get into a point where we can get more organizations to be conscious and use smaller language models, then it will consume energy. But I don't, that's just what I think. So, Lindsay, what's your take on that?
And I was just gonna say, kind of taking a different approach to it. And like I said, there's a couple of people that I know who are very, very passionate about how do we actually apply AI to all of these climate problems and energy problems. Because when you look at it, it's like it's a ton of data that we have to use responsibly, and we also have in terms of this consumption and storage and like all of the things that at product managers we should be thinking about in terms of true costs and resources. Um, so there's a ton of data out there, and I think that there are a lot of people who are thinking about, well, so how do we make climate and sustainability in the world a better place through AI by applying AI to these problems? and maybe that was your question, Dan. And yeah, I'll put some more details in the slides and for things to follow and reach out to if you're interested.
Yeah. Yeah, great questions. Does anybody else have any other questions? Because these are really good. Because these are things that we have to start thinking about. And again, when it comes to policy reform around generative AI, these are big questions that need to be figured out from a legal and regulatory perspective. There's a couple of federal agencies that still can't use this technology because of what it consumes and what it is encompassed by it. And so we still have to figure out how to do that and how to create it for these organizations, using their own data, right, without interfering with public information from the federal side. So there's that aspect. But if there are no more questions, I thank everyone for joining and pinging us with your questions and so forth. Definitely reach out to Lindsay. You can always reach us here as well. We're always having these types of topics with various people. Next month, we have someone who has been in data science for decades who's going to be joining us, and she has a wealth of knowledge. She has contributed to your map navigation. So you navigating using a map nowadays. She has been one of the leading pioneers behind that. So we're looking forward to having her in April and talking to her a little bit about her experience and what she thinks going forward. So I enjoyed you today, Lindsay. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. This was super fun, and I hope we continue the dialogue.
Of course, of course, of course. All right. Have a good weekend. Talk to everyone later. Bye.
Happy Friday.